this hymn.
Flood, lose all their guilty stains, lose all their guilty stains, lose all their guilty stains, and sinners plunged beneath that flood, lose all their guilty stains. Rejoice to see that fountain in his day, and there may I go while as he wash all my sins away, wash all my sins away, wash all my sins away. Sins away, dear dying Lamb, thy precious blood shall never lose its power, till all the ransomed church of God be saved to sin no more, be saved to sin no more, be saved to sin no more, till all the ransomed church of God be saved to sin no more. Ever since by faith I saw the stream, thy flowing wounds supply, redeeming love has been my theme, and shall be till I die, and shall be till I die, and shall be till I die. Redeeming love has been my theme, and shall be till I die.
Sing this last verse with us.
When this poor lisping, stammering tongue lies silent in the grave, then in a nobler, sweeter song I'll sing thy power to save, I'll sing thy power to save, I'll sing thy power to save. Then in a nobler, sweeter song I'll sing thy power to save.
These last two lines one more time.
I'll sing thy power to save, I'll sing thy power to save. Then in a nobler, sweeter song I'll sing thy power to save.
Gentlemen, thank you. It's a great song. Thanks for coming out tonight, for joining us on line. We continue in our study of Habakkuk. We are going to begin to transition into chapter 3 tonight. We noted the book is very unique in that it's a conversation between God and the prophet. No one else is directly involved. We know nothing about Habakkuk other than the meaning of his name, which means embrace, and he certainly does that in the book. Each chapter has a key concept. And so in chapter 1, it was a burden. And a burden is a burden. Habakkuk's country, he's a patriot, I believe all the prophets were, is on the verge of collapse. And unprecedented things are happening primarily because of what Manasseh did and his very wicked 55-year reign. We are at the end, and that bothers the prophet, but what bothers him more is that God doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. God appears to be apathetic, and he takes his burden to God, and God says, "You're right, I'm going to do something, I'm going to raise up the Babylonians," and that made it worse. And we noted that takeaways from chapter 1, our burdens need to be the things that burden God. And beloved, you're probably well aware tonight, there's enough in our culture that's burdening God out there. You know, it doesn't need any of our hang-ups or any extra biblical issues or anything like that. Those of us who are older, we are seeing, even in the last month, we have simply seen unprecedented things that we never thought we would see in our country. And it is truly heartbreaking, and it should drive us to our knees. We noted that he continues to talk to God. That is such a key. Please never give God the silent treatment. And he chooses to wait. And that is a key. We often give up on God too easily. You know, when do you stop marching around your Jericho? And from a biblical perspective, the answer is you don't. You keep walking around it as long as God tells you to walk around it. In chapter 2, the key concept is the vision. God answers his prayer. And again, there are no time frames mentioned in the book. And I believe that is so that we won't lock God into a cookie-cutter mold, that he will treat us in the same way within the same time frames. First section of chapter 2, phenomenal section on the Word of God. It's the foundation of the Word. And then God gives the prophet this panoramic view of everything that he's going to do. In that, yes, Babylon will be used to judge Judah. Judah will impact Babylon spiritually. The Medes and the Persians will deal with Babylonian pride, and wise men will be involved in the birth of Christ. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line there. That isn't included in that vision, but that's the big picture. And we noted that in chapter 1, Habakkuk was looking at the problem through a microscope. In chapter 2, God is looking at it through a telescope. Both are essential tools, but it is easy to become nearsighted in our Christian experience, and that will usually be detrimental. We've got Christianity as a big picture belief system. We noted then from chapter 2, it's all about the Word. God is saying, I am fair, I am just. One of the big issues in our country right now. But justice must be based on truth. You cannot have justice without truth. You must have all of the facts. And then we called it the most important principle. That thing that keeps you awake at night. God knows more about it than you do. Because in chapter 1, God, the prophet, told God about Babylon. In chapter 2, God tells the prophet about Babylon. God knew more. And whatever it is that's bugging you tonight, God knows more about it. You know, Genesis 22:1, the Lord says to Abraham, take now your son, your only son, the son that you love. God is not doing that to be mean. Whenever God puts his finger on something in our life that is very close and very precious to us, God knows what it means to us. And he knew what it meant to Abraham. He knew what he was asking of the prophet. He knows what we are going through as we go through this pandemic and civil unrest that our country is going through right now. Chapter 3. Guys, give me thank you. Burden, vision, key in chapter 3 is a prayer. And there's a progression. But both involved waiting and continuing to talk to God. And so it's the prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet. It's the second time he refers to himself as a prophet. Upon a word that I struggle to pronounce, I've been messing with it all afternoon, Shig no Noth. That's close enough for the girl I go with. How's that? And you can't do any better, so that's fine. It's a very rare Hebrew term. The only other place we find it in the Old Testament, it introduces Psalm 7. It appears to be a musical term. And that figures because you musicians have your own language. So, you speak what the rest of us don't speak. Good for you. The definition seems to be ecstatic, excitement. And that is putting us in the ballpark. We also know from the last verse in the chapter, there's a note to the musicians. And so this prayer appears to be in a psalm and was meant to be sung. And so the next time you musical people are looking for a project, just put this to music. How's that? There's a lot of good stuff there. Verse 2, O Lord, I have heard thy speech. God, everything you just said to me in chapter 2, I got it. I listened. Notice, it shakes him up. I was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make known. In wrath, remember mercy. He's saying, God, the big picture now makes sense. And I understand, I get it, I agree. Lord, it's an awesome thing. And his request here, Lord, in wrath, remember mercy. I mean, as he had that panoramic view of history, of judgment, of Babylon judging Judah, of Babylon being judged by the Medo-Persians, of everything that's going on. He says, God, and from that, his perspective, from a fallen human perspective, it's just also terrible. He says, Lord, please remember to be merciful. And then he transitions, and the prayer continues. Give me verse 3, please, guys. 3 through 6. And what apparently happens here, beloved, God appears to him, and he has a theophany. The dynamics, having never experienced one, I'm not sure really what it is. It appears to be some sort of a personal encounter, whether he was asleep, whether it was a dream, whether it was another vision. And God is revealing things from him. I would use a contemporary athletic term that most of us would be familiar with. God gives the prophet a highlight film. You ever seen one of those? You have an athlete, and they take various clips of their career, and they put them all together, and it's the highlights of that career. This appears to be a spiritual highlight film. It is focusing in on God's character, on his power, on his provision, that he is worthy of praise. Just a few verses. And again, you could imagine when you put these concepts with the powerful communication medium of music. How moving it must have been. God came from Teman. The Holy One came from Mount Paran. Selah, again, a psalm term. Mood change. His glory covered the heavens. The earth was full of His praise. His brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of His hand, and there was the hiding of His power. Before Him went the pestilence, and burning coals went forth at His feet. He stood and measured the earth. He beheld and drove asunder the nations. Again, 6a, maybe appears to be a reference to the creation. Drove asunder the nations. The everlasting mountains were scattered. The perpetual hills did bow. His ways are everlasting. Beloved, this is an encounter with El Shaddai, the one who thunders, the awesome one. And God appears to be reenacting these events somehow before the eyes of the prophet. He is experiencing these things. There appear to be references, to the Exodus, to creation. Verse 7. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, and the curtains of the land of Midian did tremble. What's that a reference to? Gideon. Judges chapter 7. And they're outnumbered. The Midianites, their camels, they were the sand as the sea. Gideon is down to 300 men, and yet God took care of them. Verse, 11, guys. The sun and the moon stood still in their habitation. What's that a reference to? Joshua chapter 11, and one of his key battles. Again, it's just highlight after highlight after highlight. At the light of thine arrows they went, and at the shining of thy glittering spear. Next verse, guys. This is at the end. This is the impact that it had, beloved. When I heard, my belly trembled. My lips quivered at thy voice. It impacts him physically. Beloved, that's what really got me. You get back into the 80s and people were claiming to have visions of God and all this stuff. No, I don't know what they were having visions of, but it wasn't God. You encounter El Shaddai, it's going to shake you up physically. It's going to get your attention. You're never going to be the same. Rottenness entered into my bones, and I trembled in myself, that I might rest in the day of trouble. When He cometh up unto the people, He will invade them with His troops. And it impacts him spiritually as well, beloved. But God is just showing His providence and His sovereignty and all of these things to the prophet, and however this is being communicated to him. But complete control. And God is saying here, I am fair, I am reliable, and I am consistent. Now, that's a summary. Spend some time with it. If you're musical, go into your music mode and filter it through that. Here's the major takeaway, beloved, from chapter 3. We simply need an anchor. And that's, again, I think that's been one of the things that God has been trying to remind people of in the midst of the pandemic in a very gentle way. You don't have an anchor. You need an anchor. And that's one of the ways that we can live in this world. Again, beloved, we need to demonstrate stability and hope. And in essence, as God goes through this highlight film and continually reminds the prophet of His sovereignty and His providence and all of these things, God is asking the prophet this question: in the past, what situation has ever been beyond my control? And what's the answer? None. None. Is the pandemic beyond God's control tonight? No. Is the civil unrest in our country beyond God's control tonight? No. Now that doesn't take away human responsibility. But I assure you tonight, God is not sitting on the throne wringing His hands saying, oh my, did this go way beyond what I thought it would? Isn't that comforting? He is in complete control. It is that anchor. And beloved, here is something essential about the prophet's anchor, because we have a tendency to spiritualize things like this. We have a tendency to make it pie in the sky and to put it within the terms of Christianese and things like that. The anchor was very concrete. It was founded in Israel's past, in their history, and in the way that God had dealt with them. It was tangible, literal, historical events. And that is the foundation of your anchor as well. You look back over your life and the way that God has dealt with you within the boundaries of His will and His word. And that's your anchor. And when you take time to do that, tonight or any night, here is what you are going to find. Faithfulness, consistency, goodness, control. And that's what the prophet found. He sees this consistency. A principle I learned, guys, I think I had the David verse up. And this is a great principle, again, personally, just to remind ourselves of God's faithfulness. The background is this. David and his men are on the run. There are probably about 600 of them. They are out on a raid. And while they are out on a raid, the Amalekites come into their camp unguarded, and they destroy the camp. They kidnap everyone, and they take everything, and David and his 600 men return. And they find it. And you can't even imagine what that would have been like. And the verse prior to this says, the men wept until they could weep no more. I mean, their hearts are broken. And they hurt. And then they do what we often do when we hurt. They begin to lash out horizontally. They begin to find a scapegoat. Well, David, you're our leader. This is how this happened. It's you. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him. Beloved, several hours before this, every man in that camp would have died for David. But that's what happens when you're hurt. That's what happens when we allow the element of surprise to surprise us. Because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. I love that last phrase. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. It was the only place he could go. And sometimes, beloved, circumstances may be such, the only outlet you have for encouragement is to look up. Please do that. And that's what the prophet is doing. He doesn't seem to have a lot of righteous company as we get close to the Babylonian invasion. But he continues to look up. And the next verse reveals that the priest comes, reveals to David a plan, and the story ends well, folks. Don't let it keep you up tonight. They get everything and everybody back, okay? And David will become king, and everything is good. But you just have to wonder, what was involved in all of that? Encouraged himself in the Lord. Did he get back to Goliath in a battlefield? Did he get back to the lion and the bear? Did he go back to the 3 times that Saul tried to kill him? What did he think about in those moments? Encouraging himself in the personal faithfulness of God in his life. I love Joshua chapter 12. It is the concept of the scoreboard. The conquering of the land is now over. 7 years. It's a long time. And the general, I picture him just sitting under a tree, and he's writing it for us. And he goes through every battle, every softball game. Yeah. Jericho, check, win. AI, win. Northern Campaign, win. 31 battles. And he isn't doing that, folks, to take up space. Every victory is essential. Did you have a victory today? I hope you did. Did it seem insignificant? It wasn't. Did you hold your tongue when you're supposed to hold your tongue? Did you let somebody cut you off and not retaliate? Someone who treated you a little grumpy? Did you just smile and say, have a nice day, and mean it? Those are all victories. All victories are significant. And whenever Israel fought God's way, they won. 31 victories. At the end of the conquest, the score was 31-0. That's a great softball score, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. But it was grounded in a personal history of God. Please, beloved, develop your anchor tonight. And you have one. You've all been walking with the Lord long enough that you can look back and you can see the fingerprints of faithfulness. Now, next week, Lord willing, we will conclude. And again, this is very practical. If you have an anchor, 3 things will be true of you. You will enjoy rest, you will rejoice, and you will have renewed strength. And that's the focal point of the last several verses. And we'll break those down and give you a little bit of detail about each, what they mean, and then I'll give you a couple of just overall outlines of the book to hopefully help it put some things in perspective. Again, a lot to pray about tonight, particularly our missions family. I'll be praying for them. If you get the email blitzes or whatever from First Choice, again, in the last week, they've had a couple of abortion-minded women contact them. I'll be praying for that. This is the first week of camp up at Living Waters. I'll be praying for that. I talked with Rebecca Philpott. Pray for Rebecca. Both of her parents are terminal. Her dad's in a lot of pain right now in Ohio, and so it makes it very difficult. The shelter has just started taking residents, and they only can take them in one at a time. But again, it's a transition. They are working on building a garage this summer, and so keep that in mind if you would. But all of our missionaries, keep them in mind. A lot of physical needs, as always, within the body. Be praying for our country, for the civil unrest, for the pandemic, particularly where there have been outbreaks, for the school reopening, folks. It's a big deal. And I just pray that it won't become another political football, and that there'll be some sort of common sense approach as we, again, consider the welfare of our children. And so keep that in mind. I would appreciate your prayers as I'm going to meet with Pastor Josh and Patrick after church tonight. We're going to begin to talk about some of our options for the fall for our youth ministries. I would appreciate your prayers for that. Our VBS crew just put together a bunch of goodie bags, and they're going to be delivered to all the kids that came to VBS last year. And so we just want to be a blessing to them, an encouragement to them. And so pray for those bags tonight as they were sent out. Those are really cool. But keep that in prayer if you would. And again, for us, as we reopen, I've been very encouraged by the consistency. The numbers have increased every week. Financially, we are doing very well. I'm very encouraged by that. But again, it's still, I long for normal, folks. I really do. But it's been good thus far. God has been faithful, for sure. Gentlemen, let's go out in the fellowship hall, spend some time in prayer. You ladies may remain here. Those of you at home,